freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's ZOZO Championship. Joining me to break it all down, Greg DuCharme is here. Hello, Greg.
What's going on, Rick? Excited to be here. We got a great field this week. Very good field. And a really cool golf course. So I'm looking forward to it.
It took you half a second to downgrade this field from great to very good.
You know, it's very good at the top end. Probably the best we'll see in the fall, which is cool. And look, the bottom end is understandably, let's say, unfamiliar.
You and I were having a nice football conversation before the show started. You were enlightening me to the vibes, the thoughts, and the feelings around being a New York Jets fan, which I find to be fascinating this year because there was so much hype leading into the year. Then to have the crushing loss of Aaron Rodgers, but still to be playing pretty well. Like it's a roller coaster of emotions just for me as a national viewer.
Yeah, you're looking at a team without their starting quarterback that has beat the Bills. They had him for 4 plays, didn't complete a pass. So you beat them. You beat the Bills without Rodgers. You now beat the Eagles. By the way, who would have thought that the two teams to knock off the last remaining undefeated to be the Jets and the Browns?
How about that?
I mean, so that's a really good win. You also beat the Broncos. And there's a lot of good stuff going on. The defense looks great. They're getting Garrett Wilson going a little bit. Breece Hall is a superstar. So you have some weapons on offense as well. And they're rallying around this team, you know, and I think that's a credit and a testament to Saleh, which is what they were hoping for when he was brought in. And I think this team has been a very good football team. Now, without Rodgers, your ceiling is kind of limited, right? I mean, I know you beat the Eagles and you beat the Bills, so you could beat anybody, right? But come playoff time, you got to deal with the Chiefs, you got to deal with the Dolphins, you got to deal with the Bills. You got a lot of, who knows what happens with the Bengals.
January football a little bit different than October football.
Yes. You know, the Ravens playing some good football. Although, did they win yes? I think the Ravens won.
You were asking the wrong guy.
Yeah, they beat the Titans. They held on to win. So they're playing good football. It's just there's a lot of good teams in the AFC, and I worry that that Zach Wilson can only take them so far.
Well, we'll see. Lots of football left to be played. Lots of golf still to be played this week. And then, Greg, a bye week next week. There is not a PGA Tour event on the calendar. What will you do? Will you travel the world? How will you spend your extra time?
Oh, Rick, that is something very undecided. I don't know the answer to that yet. My guess is nothing special. My guess is just playing dad.
Mine is getting caught up on things I've been meaning to do
for
a while. Yeah, no, I feel it. All right. Well, this week we are headed to Japan. So get your lineups in early, get your wagers in early. We are headed back to Accordia Golf Narashino Country Club. It is the ZOZO Championship, and it's a little bit of a different look that we've had here in the FedEx Cup Fall, Greg, because this is a small field, 78 players, no cut. It is top heavy, as you mentioned. It's injected as well with about a dozen golfers from the Japanese golf tour. So there's just a lot of stuff going on here. And this looks very much like the ZOZO championships of the past and not a traditional FedEx Cup Fall event like we have learned in the last couple of weeks.
It seems like, you know, for some of your stars like Xander Schauffele, Colin Morikawa, perhaps Ricky Fowler, this is that kind of one event that they play in the fall. Maybe it's checking a box, keeping the competitive juices flowing, something along those lines, but it does give us a very cool look, a very cool feel heading into this week. And it's a golf course that I think is very interesting for a number of reasons, which we can get into in a minute. But I think it makes for a really enjoyable watch. And it's going to be really fun to break this down from a DFS perspective.
Yeah. So this event, I'll pull up the scorecard here and everything in just a second. But this event has been around for 4 years. 3 of them have been played at Narashino Country Club. The other edition, Greg, trivia, was played at
Sherwood.
Sherwood. That's right.
Yes.
Sherwood Country Club in Southern California. I mean, I was looking for any reason to tell you that I played it, and it is just
That's why.
that's the place that when you show up on the grounds, you're like, yeah, I'm mad and expensive. I'm mad and expensive. It feels expensive.
Right. It has that look. It's a cool gem. You know, it kind of gets overshadowed in California golf, but I can imagine it's one of the top. I love when Tiger's event was there.
Yeah.
It just creates great theater. So that was a really cool spot too.
Winged Foot and Sherwood are 2 elite logos. Sherwood has the like the Robin Hood guy.
Oh, right. Yeah, very good logo.
Yeah, and
Winged Foot's, yeah, of course. It's Winged Foot's is just simply iconic.
Listen, don't overthink it. It's a winged foot. Just do it. Don't
throw it there. Yeah.
So 3 editions at Accordia Golf Narashino Country Club. Josh, if you want to show my screen, I've got my website, rickrungood.com. I've got the scorecard here as well. The reason that I have both is because it is, you know, I run the model every week, Greg, and it's a small sample size when you only have 3 years of history. This model, it strictly looks at the types of golfers that have had success on each golf course, and the bombers have kind of dominated around Narashino in the 3 editions. So I will supplement that with the scorecard here. And you mentioned there are some unique and some interesting aspects. So we can kind of talk through this, any angle that you want to start with.
Yeah, I think you look at the 10 par 4s on this property, and that's where I think you find the most interest. So you have a number of short par 4s. I think number 1, 405, 383 at number 2. And then you got 395 at number 9. 400 at number 10, and the last one would be 15, which is 425.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, 425, that's a driver or 3-wood and a wedge on all of those holes. I mean, if not just a little flip wedge. But then you have holes like number 4, 505. You go to number 9, 486. Number 11, 486. 18, 562. Oh, that's a par 5.
17.
Oh, it's 17,
yeah.
491.
Yeah.
Right. So you have 5 short par 4s and 5 long par 4s.
Mm-hmm.
Then you look at these par 5s and you have reachable at number 6. You have on the second 9, you have 14, which is really long, and 18, which is reachable. The par 3s all kind of fall in this range with the exception of 13. You got 183, you got 167. I guess that's on the shorter end, but pretty close, and 180 with number 3. So, you know, it puts a lot of emphasis when you start to really do the math on this 175 to 225 range. There's a lot of longer irons than you would expect at a golf course that's under 7,100 yards. Yeah,
it is a very unique setup from that perspective. I mean, being a par 70 with the 3 par 5s, the way that the 4s are constructed, as Greg so perfectly laid out, there are not a lot of venues that I think if you started to compare scorecards, Greg, would be, I don't want to use the word extreme because that makes it seem almost quirky or, you know what I mean, or unfair, but it is kind of extreme just because it's not something that we see all the time.
No. And when you look at the total and you say, okay, well, 7,000 yards, we can handle that. But there's a lot of holes that become a lot to handle.
Yeah.
And that makes it challenging. You add in here, you have some really small greens. This is a venue where there are actually 2 greens on each hole.
Love that.
Which is very cool. But they're small in design, so they become difficult to hit, especially when you're coming in from outside of 175. And I think that's one of the aspects one of the many that makes this golf course unique. Now, it's moderately challenging. It's not the birdie fest that we typically see in the fall, which is pretty cool. So I think short game will play a much bigger influence here as well.
Yeah, 15 under par won it last year. That got the job done. In fact, 15 under in each of the last 2 years got it done. Tiger's year in 2019, 19 under did. I feel like it was soft that year. Is that right? Tiger won.
Yeah, it was soft. Tiger also really hit the ball well. When you think about some of the things that I'll be looking at this week, like that long iron play in general is just where Tiger Woods excels. Didn't
he bogey like the first 3 holes that week?
Yeah, bogey to start.
I remember being like, why am I up at 1 o'clock in the morning for this? Like,
yeah.
Why I'm going to bed. He is 3 over through 3. This stinks. I can't.
And then Sunday, you're saying, how is everybody not awake right now?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. I had one other thing. Oh, those 2 greens. I love this. That's fairly common in Japan. It's basically a winter green and a summer green made out of different types of grass. And if you so if your ball lands on the wrong green, Greg, you are not allowed to hit it off. You've got to take relief from the wrong green and then chip to the correct one.
Yeah. And summer greens and winter greens for sure. But they also want to have, limit some foot traffic as well. So you're not playing it off even though these players probably could. This is the 1 week where they could probably allow it. But they decide not to. So there will be no divots taken on the other greens.
Do you know of any course in America that does this, the double greens for foot traffic or for just I mean, I've seen holes with 2 greens, but not 36 different greens because the idea is you could also have a bunch of different pin positions and a bunch of, different ways to play the hole. I've seen that on singular holes. I have not seen 36 greens on 18 holes.
No, I haven't either. Pine Valley has a couple of holes, 1 or 2 holes with multiple greens. But no, it's very uncommon in the United States. I've never seen it. Look, there's a lot to design. There's a lot to maintain. It's a challenging thing from a greenskeeper perspective. And I think the architects who have done a lot of their work here in the States would prefer just to have larger greens with multiple hole locations.
Yeah. Okay. Let's jump into the player pool. We'll start with the expensive guys. We'll go down to the cheapies and we'll see what we can find everywhere in between. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
The Scudetto, where the soul of Italy meets the pinnacle of calcio. Catch Serie A on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount Plus.
And we're back. Here is the cheat sheet. And there are 4 golfers over $10,000. Their names: Xander Schauffele, Colin Morikawa, Sungjae Im, and Ricky Fowler. Greg, interesting because for 3 of these guys, we have not seen them since the Ryder Cup. That's Xander, Colin, and Ricky, while Sungjae is coming off of a runner-up finish in a playoff on the KPGA. So how do we start breaking down and figuring out what to do with the high end here?
Yeah, I think you have a couple of options here. Really, you probably have 4 options depending on what you're feeling like. But if I have to pick out 2 players, I think I'd lean towards Xander Schauffele and Sungjae Im. Xander Schauffele is just, not only does he stick out in basically any way you run your model, but the reason for that is just an absolutely complete game. Yeah. I know the Ryder Cup, there was some drama that he was involved in, and he didn't really show up to play. It feels like a little bit of a different issue than what we're going to experience this week. This is a phenomenal driver of the ball, a great iron player, including long irons. He has a very, very reliable short game, which I do think will be important this week. And he's been putting as well as anybody on the PGA Tour since, May. It's been absolutely phenomenal on the greens. So he's as reliable and as consistent as they come on the PGA Tour. And it's hard to find a reason to sit him down unless you're putting a lot of weight on the Ryder Cup.
That's the only thing. The recency bias, the Ryder Cup, not only the drama, but I mean, he was pretty bad. He was pretty bad at the Ryder Cup. And if you just remove that line from the player profile, I mean, he is phenomenal. He's very clearly the best player in this field. You look at his history at this event, which he's played all 4 years, obviously only 3 in Japan, but the 3 in Japan, T10, T28, T9. So expectations are high for Xander. It really, like you said, Greg, just depends on how much you want to put on the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, and I there's a couple ways you could look at that. I questioned a lot of the preparation from the American team as a whole after the Ryder Cup, and just taking that much time off was a concern for me. But I don't think Xander wants to play like that anymore. And I think he's going to come into this week ready to go, and that you're going to see that game on full display. So different style of golf. You don't have to worry about a teammate, whether it's your best friend or not. You're playing golf. This is now your profession. You're back to your job the way it normally is, and I think that's a really good thing for Xander.
I have been pretty much in the camp of this just kind of weird run from Collin Morikawa of win luck, right? I mean, when I look at his stat profile, I see very similar things that I've seen from him for basically the entirety of his career. A positive driver. He can absolutely be the best iron player of the week. The short game is the putter is it's kind of all over the place. Depends on what you get each and every week. And I don't think that is any different. I don't think the 2023 version of Collin Morikawa has been any different than the 2021 version of Collin Morikawa, except for trophies. And I don't know, maybe I'm just stuck in this viewpoint of him.
It's a really hard thing to kind of figure out, because I've looked at this all year and been kind of waiting for the win out of Collin. And so what are you left with? Do you play him every week? Do you play him no weeks?
I've been playing him every week, Greg. It's been going phenomenally bad.
Yeah, it could be kind of a frustrating deal. So he checks every box with the exception of probably short game. I think short game could play a pivotal role this week. And it may not be the kind of thing that keeps him out of contention and keeps him out of a productive fantasy week, but it may be the thing that keeps him away from a trophy. So if there's any slip in the iron play on these small greens, he's going to have to lean on that short game. And it does worry me a little bit more than Xander, in essence. And so I feel like you're kind of between those two, and I lean towards Xander over Collin in that. But it's tough. I wouldn't fault you for playing Collin. It's just what does it come down to? Is it a feel? Is it a guess?
Yeah, I mean, because I think when we get later in the week and the projected ownerships are going to be pretty close on both of them, it's just going to be like, which one do you like more? And I mean, there are where like golf is hard enough to predict. It's going to come down to just an absolute razor thin margin between these two guys.
Can you skip them both?
Okay, well, that's what's interesting, right? I think there's it's the two at the top and the two at the bottom of this range, I think are pretty similar, right? Because then you get Sung Jae at 10-2, Ricky Fowler at 10,000. You could argue just starting the nines, which I think are pretty stock full. But before we get there, Ricky Fowler kind of got a pretty good pass from his Ryder Cup disappointment because he had the stomach bug. We kind of knew that early in the week. But Greg, his end of the season was not nearly as good as the vast majority of his season. He is coming off of a runner-up finish at this event last year. How do you assess the chances of Ricky with a lot of these unknowns flying around?
Yeah, it feels very, very bland to me. Ricky's kind of been an all-around player. I would classify him as an all-around player, skill set wise throughout his entire career, which, like Xander Schauffele is an all-around player, I would say. Patrick Cantlay is an all-around player. I would put Ricky Fowler in that place as well. If I had to lean anyway on his skill set, it would be the putting. And the putting at the end of the year wasn't great. At the Ryder Cup, it was kind of disappointing. And the rest of his game has just been a little bit bland. So I might take a chance on Ricky if he was in the 9K range, but I just feel like his price is too high. I'd rather have Xander or Colin. I'd rather have Sungjae. I'd probably rather have Hideki Matsuyama, who starts off the 9K.
Yeah, that's kind of, I think, maybe one of the more interesting things is for this week is going to be the builds that you can put out there. You know, you can only get one of Xander or Colin in almost all cases. You might be able to get one of Xander and Colin and one of Sungjae and Ricky, but you're really going to have to dip down and get some risky guys at the bottom, or you could bypass all four of them and go down to the 9Ks, which starts with Hideki, who's won this event and finished runner-up at this event, Keegan Bradley, who's been phenomenal around here, Minwoo Lee coming off of a victory, Adam Scott involved, Cam Davis. I mean, this is an absolute stacked range of golfers.
We always make these notes. I write down players in each range, and next to 9K, I drew a little heart because I love the whole range. I mean, you got Sahith coming off a win. You got Cam Davis, who's been playing phenomenal. Yeah. You got Adam Scott, who I think looks really good this week. This is stout. And it's hard to find a bad direction. And that makes it really hard to play Ricky Fowler, in my opinion. Maybe he's a pivot. If the projected ownership comes out and it looks very low, he may be a good pivot play to differentiate your lineup. But I mean, these guys are all so strong. I have to imagine the ownership's going to kind of balance out in this range.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Because there is just a plethora of riches here. And I think that to an extent, you know, there are pretty narrow fairways here, which guys play out of the rough. So I don't think being super accurate is incredibly important. But, you know, someone like a Cam Davis, I want to point out because, you know, he is, to me, maturing at a rapid rate. Greg, we talked about this last week. I didn't think TPC Summerlin was a particularly great spot for him. And you and I debated, well, that might not be true, because when you look at some of these places where you can club down, he has played fairly well. And you were absolutely right about this. I think he is showing that there might not just be specific courses for him. You know, he's got 5 top 10 finishes in his last 6 starts. It is starting to become a more all-around game. The short game is impressive. I need to take a little bit of responsibility here, because Cam Davis is getting better each and every week.
It's just phenomenal. It's been absolutely elite. I feel like he's a steal at 9,500. Now he may be chalky, which could be the one drawback on Cam Davis, but the course style is almost irrelevant. And I kind of thought these club down courses were good for him because it forced accuracy in a way and allowed him to rely on the rest of his game, which is so good. But I think what we're learning, especially after a performance like we've seen at both Fortinet and Shriners, which are pretty driver heavy golf courses, that, hey, this guy could just flat out play, you know, and any style kind of works for him. This is a golf course with some dog legs. Almost every hole has a dog leg. It has narrow fairways, which maybe minus the dog legs reminds you of Fortinet. I think there's a world where Cam Davis is your winner this week. He has that kind of game.
Yeah, he's been playing phenomenal golf. I mean, line him up, right? I mean, Sahith finished 5th here last year and is coming off the victory. Keegan Bradley has gone 13th, 7th, and a win. I'll tell you what, I don't like to step into the narrative streets too often, but when they line up with great recent play, great course history, and Ryder Cup snubbery, Greg, Ryder Cup snubbery, I do like to step into those streets.
Yeah, there's a lot of really compelling stories with that. He talked about this last year after his win. It reminds him of the courses he played in the Northeast. We've known that Keegan Bradley has gotten a lot better with the putter, and he's a great putter on bent grass greens. And the greens that we'll be playing this week are bent grass. So that's another added benefit. The tree line golf courses seem to really fit his eye. And who knows? We could get some rain this week. It is the wet season in Japan, and Keegan's definitely a mutter, used to that kind of weather. So yeah, he makes a ton of sense.
I mean, I might just do. It's so scary to not have, especially because the first 3 events of the fall have been dominated by the best players. I would kind of argue, I think there's a really big drop off from basically Sahith, maybe Eric Cole, to everybody else. But I'm quite worried about missing out on Colin, Ricky, Xander, Sungjae. But man, I would love to load up on this night, like just all of them. Adam Scott's been playing great. I ran a bunch of models this morning. Adam Scott was like top of all of them.
He's everywhere. So I love the entire 9K range. I told you I wrote a heart next to it, right? But the 3 guys I pulled out were Cam Davis, Adam Scott, and Sahith. And maybe that should have been Keegan Bradley in that 3rd spot.
I like Keegan a lot.
But the point is, I love Adam Scott. And I'm wondering if people are paying attention because he's played some DP World Tour stuff quite well. At least at the BMW PGA, came and tied 7th. Look at the ball striking, which he kind of hasn't been able to lean on for the last little bit, but it seems to be rather warm right now.
He's playing great.
And doesn't it feel like an Adam Scott golf course?
Yeah, it kind of does.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm with you.
I mean, I don't like just going on the narrative. He has one start here in 19. He came and tied 33rd, which doesn't really ring the bell, but you just think about what it requires, and Adam Scott fits the bill. So maybe he's the play. Maybe you pivot off of a Cam Davis, who's probably going to be very popular, and you go down to an Adam Scott. It could be a strong play like Adam Scott and Keegan Bradley on top of your lineup. I mean, those are very good players. You're missing out on a lot of really good names on top of them, but those guys could both contend and compete here without question.
I agree with you. The 8K range is where I believe there is a little bit of a drop off, but we're going to talk about those guys and more after a quick word from our partners.
This Saturday, it's back to back to back college football.
Into the end zone. What a throw, unreal.
It all starts at noon on CBS Sports Network.
And we're back. 8K range. Not that I think there's plenty of great options here, but I think this is where you get a significant drop off. Eric Cole, Thomas Dietrich, Nikolai Højgaard, Emiliano Grillo, Bo Hostler's in the middle, and then we round it out with Vincent Norman, Keith Mitchell, Adam Svensson, Alex Noren, Aaron Rye, and Adam Schenk. So, Greg, this is like, okay, if we started here and these were all the players, this would be our FedEx Cup fall field. They're cheaper, right? They're going to start down here, but they've got those names to contend with at the top.
And it could be a really important part of your lineup. If you try to really stack up top in that 10 and 9K range, which is a great strategy, this range may get left out. Because now at the bottom end in the 6K it's a little thin, which we'll get to a little bit later. So I don't think this is a pivotal range here in this in your lineup, depending on the way that you build it. But it could be if you go and you don't want to leave off Xander Schauffele, which I'm fine with that kind of build too. But I look at Eric Cole, and he's becoming to me a guy you could play every week. You know, just about every single week, you can just put Eric Cole in your lineup. And you may have to deal with a T35 every once in a while, but you're going to get a lot of really, really strong finishes out of him. And 2 out of his last 3 weeks, he's recorded top 5s. And his iron play is just red hot. It's phenomenal.
Unreal.
Now, your model, this would be the one thing that holds me back.
Yeah.
Your model is very heavy on driving. I know Andy Lack, who writes your article on your website, sees it a little bit more of a second shot golf course.
Yeah,
which is my initial read. So it's okay to step outside the data, but if you value just the numbers and the data, that may be an area of concern with Eric Cole.
Yes, and the times that I even like to step outside the data are weeks like this. 3 years of history. It's a small field. It's kind of a different-ish type of field. You're literally flying across the world. There just are a lot more variables in a week like this, and combine that with a smaller sample size. Even I am not bending the knee entirely to the data, Greg. So I agree with you. It's Eric Cole has been one of the better second shot players in the world for the last 4 or 5 months, something like that.
And look what he's done on third shots recently.
Yeah, if he has to,
last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
if he has to, which is rare, but maybe comes into play a little more this week. And you have gaining 6 shots, 4 shots, 5 shots in his last 3 weeks around the green. That could be a pretty lethal combination here. I mean, he's doing this 2 top 5 finishes in his last 3 weeks, 3 top 25 finishes in his last 4 weeks with really subpar putting. Unlike Eric Cole, who's normally a phenomenal putter, has been struggling on the greens and still putting up these kind of finishes. So he's becoming an every weeker if he keeps this kind of profile going.
I think my favorite, all things considered, looking at the price, he's lower down in the $8,000 range is Adam Svensson. And Greg, we've spent a lot of time talking about him this fall because he's been one of the better approach players. The driver's been great. He's a positive short game golfer. He's got 3 top 18 finishes in his last 3 starts. I think Adam Svensson will win this fall. I don't know if it's now. Maybe he goes and wins the RSM again. But this feels like we are on the verge of something. I hope that I am correct there.
3 straight top 20 finishes. You talk about 4 out of 5 top 20 finishes. The worst one is T37 since all the way back to the Rocket Mortgage. So this has been really steady, really consistent golf. I think he's a wonderful play at 8,200. Makes a ton of sense. A reliable rock kind of guy. So I'm right there with you on Svensson.
Cole, Svensson, a little bit of Bo Hostler because he is the guy who's got a lot to play for. He is, longer than people realize. He finished 16th here last year. He's got 3, really 4 good results leading into this. A little bit of Bo, a little bit of Adam Schenk. If I want to get real nasty, that's my 8K spend. I walked with Grillo last week. It's not good. The stats back it up. I love Vincent Norman. I think he's going to be very difficult to handicap. I need to see more out of Keith Mitchell. Right. So those 4, I'm really rallying around.
I wrote down Cole, Hostler, Svensson. I could take a chance on Højgaard.
I don't mind that.
I don't love it, but I could take a chance on it. I just think with his ability off the tee, even though he struggled at the Shriners,
you could write this off pretty easily. Uncharacteristic, losing 7.5 strokes ball strike. I could go back. I'm sure he found a desert or some water or something like that. And his first start since the Ryder Cup, I don't think I care about that. Now, if he does it again, if he did it again this week, I'd be pretty worried about it.
Yeah, this is a little more guesswork. You're kind of going on feel and ability level, which I'm okay with in a week like this. So again, don't love it, but wouldn't mind. And hopefully he gets lower ownership because of this profile that we're looking at here. But yeah, uncharacteristic what we saw at the Shriners.
And I think what you mentioned is just by the nature of a lot of builds this week, I think anybody you play in the 8K range is probably going to be relatively low owned just because of all the builds that are going to start with the 8 or so names that are above these guys.
Yeah, and what do you think the general public will do? Will they go heavy up top? Will they go balance and hammer the 9K range?
I think there's going to be a ton of Ricky and Xander. I just think that when you start looking at the rest of this field, and the other thing is, it is a no-cut event, so you don't have the risk of just a missed cut from the guys to the bottom of the board.
Right.
And when you give Xander 4 guaranteed rounds or Colin 4 guaranteed rounds, I think that will be too good to pass up for a lot of people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So
opinion.
hey, maybe you go pretty heavy 9K and you get a couple of these 8 guys in there. Mix in a Schenk, mix in a Svensson. It could be a good little zag, if you will.
Mix in a Schenk on your lineups, not on your golf game.
No.
Try to avoid those if you could. Sevens. And there are a couple of names here that I find rather fascinating. So I won't name them all, but it's JJ Spaun and Justin Suh at the top. It goes down to Dylan Wu, Nate Lashley, Sam Ryder. Now, I think there are some very, very strong options here. Obviously, you've got to stomach a little bit of something with each one of these guys, Greg. Like, for example, I will give Tom Hoge one more crack at this. You know,
I couldn't agree more.
You know, he struggled last week. He missed the cut. I had bet him to win it outright after 2 really good starts. You were rattling off those 5 par 4s in which you're going to have wedge in. That gets me excited about Tom Hoge. He's got 2 top 17 finishes in the last 2 years. Here, if I don't give Tom Hoge one more crack at it, I might regret it.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, if you look at some of the, we're starting to get to that point too, where you can look at some of these proximity buckets, even though I don't love it. And he pops up in the 200 to, was it 220? Where did I see it?
200 to 225. He's third.
Yeah. So really, really good stuff there. So I think that's another reason to kind of mix him in, even though his wedge play is phenomenal. The long iron play is too. So that could be very worth a play. I'm very curious about JJ Spaun. You know, T46 last week had been playing really well, but lost 6 strokes putting.
I think a lot of that, I'm going to look this up, Greg. I thought that a lot of it was one day, and maybe I'm misremembering that, but I thought he got off to a good start. Let me see if I can find this. Yeah, he plays Friday. So he was phenomenal on Thursday. He lost 5.5 strokes putting on Friday. No idea what happened. I could go look it up. Small loser with the flat stick on Saturday and basically neutral for the day. And then he putts fine on Sunday and gains a stroke to the field. I mean, if you look at, go back to round 2 of the FedEx St. Jude, these 10 rounds have been great. One really bizarre putting one really bizarre putting day skews a lot of those numbers, I think.
And you look at what he's done from a week to week standpoint, gained strokes off the tee. He lost 0.3 strokes at the Shriners, but gained strokes off the tee every other event since the Memorial. Yeah. And approaching the green, very similar ilk there. Been gaining over 2 strokes just about every single week. The short game has been positive, and you have that one bad putting day. So I do think he's a very playable option. I think Hoagie's a playable option. Like we said, another guy to throw at you, Callum Tarrant. We love this guy. Looking for reasons to play him. Been kind of feeling uneasy about it, but this has been pretty good lately.
Did you see what he did on, was it Saturday? Yeah, Saturday, him and Isaiah Salinda shot a best ball. They're paired together, shot a best ball 56.
Oh, I thought it was 57. Yeah, phenomenal.
With a double.
It'd be great if they could play together again this week, because clearly some good vibes. But this approach play is starting to look like Callum Tarrant that we expected heading into 2023. Didn't quite get it. The driver has been trending in the right direction. I think there's a lot of positive things for Callum Tarrant at 7,600.
2 at the bottom. Joel
Dahmen?
Yeah, Joel Dahmen, 7,200, 13th and 7th, and he gained a ton of strokes ball striking last week. And Cam Champ, who 9th at Jackson, 18th in Vegas. He's finished 8th at this event in 2023. Finished 8th in 2021, but that was the year that was at Sherwood. Cam Champ, I was texting Josh about this. Like, he does this thing where he wins once a year, and he was great out of the gate last week. And he just got stuck in the desert. He got stuck in the desert on number 3 on Saturday. He lost 5.5 strokes to the field on Saturday. Outside of that, he had a freaking awesome week.
He shot 76, I believe, on Saturday.
Yeah.
Which is no bueno in a tournament like that.
No.
So you see a T18 on the, the official resume, but it was much better. And it was T9 at the Sanderson. Things have been trending in the right direction. And if you think back to the data again, you always want to keep in mind, it gives an advantage to distance. But you're starting to see that tee to green game start to look like Cam Champ again, which is exciting. Gained over 2.5 strokes putting his last 2 weeks. There's a lot of reasons to play a Cam Champ.
He's gained from tee to green in like 16 of his last 20 rounds and has gained with the putter in 7 of 8.
Yeah. It feels like it's a very real improvement. It feels like he's been working on his game and is starting to see results from it. It doesn't feel like, I'm just so good, I'm going to show up and win once a year.
No.
It feels like he's really got something going.
He does not feel far off to me.
No, I mean, I was on Cam Champ back around like Rocket Mortgage and John Deere and
like 3M.
Maybe Fortinet.
Oh, yeah.
What those weeks I was on Cam Champ kind of expecting this. He missed the cut in all of them. So I feel a little uneasy, but I do think the reason I was on him then is kind of showing up now. So I'm happy to jump back on that bandwagon.
Okay. Anybody else in the 7K range before we move on?
If I go with a Sam Ryder, is that just because of the commercial? Or is there really?
Well, he is like the most visible golfer on planet Earth at this point.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Just subliminally in your brain. But no, I don't think it's just that, because he's gaining a ton of strokes on approach since Deer Run. The short game is okay. Putter can come and go. His thing has always kind of been, and you're seeing it right now, he's just got to keep it in play off the tee. And I don't know how much trouble he can get in with the driver this week, but that's the thing. If he drives it well, he plays well, or he finishes well, I should say. If he doesn't, you're kind of looking at like a T31.
Yeah. Which, hey, there's a spot for that. All right. I may prefer Cam Champ to $100 more. I may prefer that risk over the Sam Ryder risk.
I think I'm with you. $6,000 range. We've got Brandon Wu, Hayden Buckley, KH Lee at the top. All the way down at the bottom, we get some of the Japanese exemptions. Kensei Hirata and Young Han Song, to name a few. I'm sure I nailed those. This is
pretty close.
This is tough. This is tough, Greg. What do we want to do?
Yeah. All right. I got a few guys here. At the top, I think you have a couple really playable guys in KH Lee and Davis Riley.
Okay.
Although Davis Riley just the fact that I said that might make you want to fade him.
I never get him right.
I'd never get him right either. And I want him to get it right. Not for me, but for him. I like him, but it just doesn't seem to happen. But if I'm looking just at numbers and analytics, I think this could be a good spot for Davis Riley. Some pretty good long iron play out of him as well. KH Lee coming off a nice week last week. Has been, he rated pretty highly in some of the long iron categories as well. Mm-hmm. Really a fan of his talent in general. Mackenzie Hughes, another guy at 6,700. Those are the three at the top that I had circled in very light pencil. Mackenzie Hughes is really just based on the style of this golf course.
Yeah.
And his performances here.
Yeah. T4, T23 in his 2 trips, but Like you said, I didn't hear a lot of ringing confidence in those light pencil, circles which is similar to how I feel in this range as well.
There's one other guy that I'm also lightly circled, but he gives you a little bit more relief because he's 6,600. Now he's missed 6 cuts. What is that? 5 cuts in a row. It's Will Gordon. Now, this is all metrics because he's one of the better long iron players in the field.
Yeah,
which I think is going to be important. I don't like to look at proximity buckets, but I'm wondering if there's something to it this week. So he comes up pretty highly in a lot of those 200 to 225.
He's very good from 175 to 225, which will probably be a lot of those shots this week. That's your right. Those are your par 5s and those long par 4s and like 3 of the par 3s.
Now, if I'm really going to make a case, that's the reason I bring up his name, because I'm looking at some of those, who are the best players from these ranges. His name comes up. It keeps coming up. Fairway, rough, like all of those categories, it seems to pop up. And then I look at his results, and there's all these missed cuts in a row. But, the last couple have been pretty close. He actually gained strokes at the Fortinet and missed the cut, right, which is pretty rare. Lost less than half a shot total last week at the Shriners.
So he probably missed both those cuts on the number.
You got a couple of nice putting weeks, okay putting weeks. And the other thing about these think about somebody who hits it long and is a good long iron player playing Fortinet, Sanderson, and Shriners. Their asset, if it's long iron play for Will Gordon, isn't really getting used very often. And I'm wondering if this.
I hate that you're talking me into this. I absolutely hate this case you're making right now.
I know.
It's pretty sound.
But I told you, I started this off lightly penciled.
For a guy who's missed 5 cuts in a row, his golfer profile page is like full of red. And here I am like, yeah, no, I get it.
Right. I don't like to go to plain old PGA Tour stats and proximity buckets. But at 6,600 at a field like this is where somebody, out of nowhere pops up. Maybe this is the reason why.
I'm just going to bet him top 20 or something like that and just go about my life.
I think he's going to get Xander in a few of my DFS lineups.
Oh boy. Okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
The only other guy that I think is interesting is Matt Neesmith, who, listen, he was there was probably a 6-month period where he was legit. I mean, maybe a full season where he was legitimately like a top 20 iron player on tour.
Yeah, it was a full season.
Yeah, and we haven't necessarily seen that, but it's starting to come around. Basically, since the Wells Fargo Championship in May, he's been so much better in those categories. His fall started off with a missed cut, but then he went T25 and T42, gained ball striking in each of those last 2. He has played this event twice. He has played here at this golf course twice, T48 and T9. That T9 was last year. That's the only other one that I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, big fan of him. Kind of came on the scene around the same time as Tom Hoge, right? Tom Hoge and Matt Neesmith were 2 of my go-to 6K guys. Hoge has vaulted himself into a different category, and it's lagged behind for Neesmith. The results haven't matched the ability. So I'm always okay with taking a flyer on a player like that.
Anybody else? Are we good here?
I don't really think I can get below Will Gordon.
No.
I couldn't. I don't think I can make a case like I did for Will Gordon for anybody else.
It was so spirited.
Yeah, but I had to work hard at that one.
Mission accomplished. Okay, cool. Sorry, Josh. I should have given you a heads up. I was going to stop sharing my screen there. Usually when I do that, it pops right back into the 2 box. It didn't do it that time. Okay, Greg. Well, listen, we've got a no cut event this week. So if you just avoid the DQ, avoid the WD, and you're going to get 4 guaranteed rounds. It'll be a little bit of evening golf. I like this. This breaks up, the fall schedule for us a little bit, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, with the bye week coming up as well, no need to rest anybody, right? We can go all in here this week. I'm looking forward to it.
That's right. Don't rest anybody. Run them out there. They got a week off. Come on, what are we doing? All right.
No pitch counts.
No pitch counts. I love it. All right, gents. Well, absolute pleasure. Producer Josh does all the hard work behind the scenes, and we'll be back on Tuesday for our mega preview pod. We'll be back Sunday for the recap episode, and you can find Greg DuCharme online at The Real GFD. You can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.